Hello all, welcome to another endgame study of the Solving Harder Studies to Improve Chess Calculation series. This is endgame study number 110 from Vladimir Korolkov. He is a very good chess composer. I have already covered in the first series of the Solving Studies to Improve Chess Calculation. And this position is harder, of course, otherwise wouldn't be here on the series. It will be a guided solution. If you haven't, as always, I suggest you watch the guide for the series and then you'll see the countdown. It's a main countdown of 10 minutes, and after it finishes, I will come back with the start of the solution. And here we are. Let's go with the first right move, which is, of course, bishop f5, check, exclamation mark. I tell you, of course, but we will see if it's that simple. Of course, over here, let's look at the position. What we can see immediately is we are threatening to promote the pawn, but we have the pawn blocked, and the same goes with black. It's also threatening to promote the h pawn, but the pawn is blocked. But of course, if it's black to play, what is the easiest way? It's to check the king. So something happened on the white side and then the promotion of the pawn. So we need to deal with that. Other from that, we also need to look that the other rook is threatening to go to b8 check, so controlling the promotion of the pawn. So we have to think all of this. And when we see, for example, rook b8 check being researched to avoid our own promotion of the pawn, we also see that we have bishop e5, so to control the check, and at the same time we can think on sacrificing for the pawn. And what happens is we check the king, and now we see that we have three options. And we also see that, for example, if it goes to a dark square, then I can check it again, and it's very interesting. But then we see that the king goes to f2, and so open up the possibility of the check and promotion. So over here we start to wonder in our calculation what is the best continuation, and after a while we may come in doubt and start by looking into bishop e5 first. So what happens if bishop e5 first? And maybe you can see that, okay, the rook can take our bishop, but this is just a mistake, because now, of course, we are going to promote the pawn to a queen. The king needs to move and goes, for example, to g2, but now white is controlling very well the pawn. So even if, for example, the now it's white to play, so let's say I go to h4, so keeping the control of the pawn. Now, if the rook goes threatening to move the king away with a discover check and then promote the pawn, well, not enough. We can simply take the pawn, and the rook needs to move away. And now we are playing with a queen and a bishop against two rooks. Now, as you can see, we are protecting the pawn. We still have another one, but just the queen and the bishop against two rooks, it would be very strong for white. So uh, the problem is over here that the rook doesn't need to take our bishop. It simply can go directly for the intended promotion. So we check the king, so the king moves away. Now we can promote for a queen, and now, of course, white also promotes to a queen. The idea is, of course, the king can't go to g2, otherwise I can check the king and I will grab the queen on the next move. So this is a easy win for white. But the king goes to g4, which is the other possibility. Let's say go over here. And now, even if maneuver, notice that exchanging queens is not enough. So I will try to maneuver to win some material, like, for example, going over here. Notice that the king has few options, but can come easily for next to the pawn. So we check it again. The king comes here, we check it, and now we are forking to grab one rook. But if we grab the rook, then black has enough compensation, grabs the bishop, and now we are playing, as you can see, to a draw. Unless someone blunders from here, it's a draw. So the conclusion is we can't lose time with bishop e5, otherwise black is going to be very fast promoting, and we simply just get a draw. So with that in mind, we need to go with bishop f5 check, of course, and we need to cover all this before going along the position. And as you can see, we are only talking on the first move yet. That's why these are others. So if we go to a dark square, I like this one very much. Of course, bishop e5 also works, but I prefer this one, this very interesting one. Why? Because here there are, of course, only three possibilities. Either I take the pawn or move the king to h5 or g3. If I move to h5, well, this is just perfect, we simply can checkmate the king, so that's not an option. So maybe let's start with taking the pawn, but this allows white to promote directly. Now, of course, if the king comes up, we simply start to threat checkmate, and if the rook tries to avoid, because I was threatening to check and then checkmate on g6, if it tries to avoid, now I am threatening the rook. So if the rook wants to survive, this one needs to move away. But if it moves away, then I can check it again and then go for checkmate. So the best here for black is to accept, take the bishop, and I take the rook. And as you can see, this is of course a win for white. So black can't accept the beautiful sacrifice, so goes to g3, and now I play e5, which is the same thing as checking the king, going to g3, and now bishop e5. So let's see now this one. Of course, over here the king needs to move, and the best move is to go to, of course, f2. So now black is threatening to promote, and we need to be careful. I was wondering if this move was important for you to have another minute or not, but I don't think it's that hard because we simply can go to the normal line. We can calculate this very fast. We promote to the queen, but then we allow the rook to check. We need to move the king away. And so we have again the same situation, that it's a draw. If the queen exchanges, as you can see, we are now just playing for a draw. So it's forced to move to f7. So this is a brilliant move, of course, to guarantee that this line, when the king goes to g3, also is a win for white, because now black doesn't has the extra tempo to avoid the promotion. Notice that the rook b8 is already covered by our bishop on e5. So even if the rook moves away, we simply can grab the pawn. So there's not enough time for black to get over this line. So after all of this, we already discovered that king g2 is the correct move, so avoiding going into dark squares. And now is the first moment for you to grab another minute or more if you need. I'm going to the second countdown, and I will continue after that. And here we are again, and I hope you haven't made the mistake of going with bishop e5 with the idea of blocking the b8 check, also controlling the pawn, and threatening to promote in the next move because you think, okay, the king is in the way from the rook g1 check, so let's move on with the bishop. What happens is black can simply go rook g1 anyway, and now, for example, if I take the pawn, which is a possibility, the king takes the bishop with check, so the king moves away, and now I have time because the bishop was forced to come taking the pawn. I am in time to sacrifice my rook for the other pawn, and this is just a draw. And the other possibility, which is to promote to a queen, just allows us also to promote to a queen, and there's no way black can take advantage of it. It's forced more or less to accept the exchange of queens, and when I take the queen back, it's check again. So the king needs to move, and now I have time to take another pawn. And you may say, oh, okay, but now I can grab one rook. Well, it depends. I will also grab one of the bishops, either one or the other. So it's a draw in the end. So bringing the bishop is not possible because we can simply go rook g1 anyway. So basically we are with just one last option, which is to check with bishop e4, which is the correct move in this second phase. So now the king to move, and probably you are wondering about the main idea being to keep the king next to the rook. And now you need to be careful because, for example, over here, if we accept the rook, as you can see, now we have time as black to go b8, to go rook b8 check, forcing the king to move away. The same goes to if it goes to g7, it's even worse. I can simply grab the bishop and then move on time to at least draw the game or win it. From here, it's a win for black. So the king moves to f7. So the idea is I sacrifice the bishop, but now I have time to go and protect the pawn. But the problem is rook can also sacrifice, and if I accept the rook, then I can promote to a queen, and white is not even drawing, it's losing over here. So we need to be careful. So when the king moves to g1, we can't accept the rook. And of course, the idea is I need to deal with this threat. This rook is not going anywhere, so the pawn is not going to promote. So the easy way is to go bishop e5, of course. And from here, it's easier. Black can simply resign. If it doesn't resign, I simply will grab whatever I want. So I can even fork the rook moves away, I can simply take the other one, and there's no way the rook can avoid. I'm going to promote, even if the rook comes here, then it's sacrificed, but then I have two bishops. One bishop is always controlling the promotion of the h pawn. So simply bishop e5 is the solution over here, and so we are good to go. But of course, this wouldn't be easier if we haven't also come up with another difficult idea, which is to go with the king to f2. And now it's white to play, and I hope you are not making the mistake of not taking the rook now. The funny thing is, we need also to consider what is going to happen, of course. Over here, black is simply threatening to check the king. We have not controlled rook b8, so the best, of course, over here is to accept and take the rook. Now the pawn is blocked to promote, so that part is expected. Of course, we are going to suffer one check, rook b8, and it's the opportunity for the last phase of the solution. I give you another minute at least. If you want, you can pause and take more and decide where to go with the king. And finally, let's go to the final phase of the solution. So we wonder what is the best, and one is winning and the other is drawing. And I hope you haven't gone to g7. The subtlety is very small, it's just one tempo between winning and drawing, but we need to understand what are the ideas from black so we can understand why king f7 is the brilliant continuation. Over here, what happened is the king blocked its own bishop from play, and the bishop is blocking the pawn from promoting. And although we want to protect the bishop from the rook, what happens is black now it's not forced to go along with the play of taking with the bishop now. Because why? Because white needs two moves and three moves to promote the pawn, so we have tempo, and so black goes to another idea, which is taking the pawn. So now it's white to play. Let's say the king goes now to f7 to force the rook to accept the bishop, and now comes back with the idea of forcing the sacrifice of the rook with the promotion, so over here. And now we are playing a draw endgame, because now we are going to approach our pawn. So the king comes, but I have enough tempo to a reach. Notice that the idea is, if the king goes, for example, to e8, which is a possibility, then I can sacrifice the pawn. So sacrificing, no, exchanging the pawn, because now the king against the bishop is never going to be checkmated. So I get a guaranteed draw. And the other way, well, let's say white tries to waste the tempo. Of course, I'm not going to move this pawn. I can simply stay here. If it checks, now I am threatening to promote. Of course, I protect the king first. Now the bishop needs to come up, and as you already saw, if the king moves away from the pawn, I just advance, and then we exchange and get the draw. And this subtle difference, let's go for the beginning. It's what happens because we went over here. So we need to force the rook to take the bishop immediately. And only in this way, we get the king one tempo faster. Notice that black king hasn't taken the pawn. So over here, and now, of course, I attack the rook moves away, I force it to sacrifice, now it's black to play. Of course, there are no easy ways for black anymore, it's a loss. But let's say it goes with the same pattern, taking the pawn. Now the king has time to reach the other pawn. And now, of course, this pawn is protected, as you can see. So now I am able to advance it. And if the king instead goes to the other side, so goes and attack our bishop, of course, the bishop just goes to e4. There is no way, let's say, for example, the king tries to come with the same idea. Well, we just go for the pawn, and when the king attacks our bishop, we simply can go to h1, so guaranteeing that the h2 pawn can't promote. The king approaches our pawn, but as you can see, it's protected, so our king can go easily grab the other pawn, and as from here we already saw, it's just bye-bye black, it's a win for white. Hope you have enjoyed it. This was probably a long one. It promotes a lot of calculation and visualization, and I see you in future ones. Bye bye.